As well. I better keep it.
David.
Keep it clean.
I'm so excited. Look how good
The reason
you
I've
look.
called you all here today.
Oh my goodness.
He was in
He
charm.
gets to sit here.
He was a demon in
Because I got here first.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
He was in Cradle to the Grave.
Yeah, when he comes in, everyone stand up. Okay?
Men in Black 2. Okay, I gotta go back and watch some of these movies because I don't remember him in
Dorked
them.
out my son.
I knew
He
Underworld.
did a couple of TV series. He was in Men in Black
Okay.
2.
Crypticon.
Planet of the Apes.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Oh my god, his voice is
Okay. Okay. So just have at it. Yeah, go nuts.
Hey, listen, wait, hot, can you hear? Hear, yes, hello. Tell me about the
Yeah, I like
mountains.
that. I like that. That's cool.
So let me say hello. First time here in this area, although in like the 80s, I did a musical up at the Starlight Theater up in Kansas City. You guys know where the yeah, production of Hair in like, I don't know what year it was, but we got rained out a lot, which was kind of disappointing because you know you're rehearsing and you want to do shows. And I've never been in an outdoor 7,000 seat theater, but oh, that's all the time we have. Please silence your cell phones. So yeah, first time here, but I'm delighted to meet many of you who have come by the table to talk about American Werewolf in London. It's funny how people pick different photos. Some pick a picture because it freaked them out, and some won't pick that same picture because it freaked them out. You know, this is a movie that was written and directed by John Landis in 1981. I met him it was one of the, I can't say easiest auditions I've ever had, but you know, generally when you're going to be in a film, you either do a screen test or do a series of interviews. And I don't know if you can see me, maybe I'll stand, and then maybe that's better for some of you. Also, you know, when I was starting out doing commercials and things in New York where I started my career, the audition process was so tedious, you know. You just would have a thing and then callbacks and then maybe have to test. This was not the case for American Werewolf. I went in to meet John Landis, who, as I said, had written the script. He'd finally gotten the financing. I think he had it budgeted at $8 million in 1981. And he went out and basically got a loan to say it was what he described as a negative pickup. In other words, we were going to go out and make this movie. He was going to deliver a cut, finished version, and then he was going to get paid. So it was a lot of risk involved, which we all found out later, of course. We thought, because of the success of his movies with Animal House and the Blues Brothers, that he could just pretty much write a check, you know, or somebody would write a check for the whole, you know, and underwrite all the financing for the film. That was not the case. He had to go out and find it. And as I said, we made the movie first. Then he got paid. So he basically took a loan to finance his film. And for $8 million, you know, the movie did pretty well over the last 6 years. So I think he got his money back. And you know, it was one of those things considered a foreign film where I was going to the Screen Actors Guild going, hey, you know, what about residuals? Now back then, you gotta remember, there were no platforms in contracts like for DVD sales. And you know, residuals were pretty much just television sales. And should it go to television, little did we know that, you know, it would become one of the hottest DVDs, you know, in all its different forms. You know, many of you probably remember the half-inch VHS copies, which we had, you know, the red one, and then, you know, now it's gone all the way to a 4K DVD, which is pretty spectacular to see on a big screen. How many of you have seen it on a big screen? Have you ever seen it in the movie theaters, or just really? The rest of you have only seen it on your, well, when it came out in film, you know, on the big screen, it was so cool. It opened August 3rd, 1981 in Times Square, and we had a big opening, you know, with the lights going and all this, you know, Siskel and Ebert were in attendance, and it was kind of a big deal for John. And he wanted fans to be certain that they knew this was a horror film. This was one that he wrote when he was 21 on the set of Kelly's Heroes. He was a production assistant. He got this idea for a werewolf film. But he wanted to make sure, because he was known for comic films, you know, like, I don't know if it's Kentucky Fried Movie, and, you know, these really hilarious films. But this was his statement film about werewolves and about being a horror film. So the marketing campaign basically said, from the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal. And that was the idea, was to, when you come here, just be prepared. And it did not, nobody read it, I guess, because people were freaked out. And we were criticized for it because it was very funny. It starts you off in a very funny way with two guys just talking and joking, and it turns pretty quickly once we get attacked. But there's still that same relationship with, you know, the boys, as John would call us. And it's still comedy. And so the critics were very ambivalent about how to review this movie, because it was unique in the sense that it used both comedy and horror, and has been copied for the last 35 years. So that's really about it. I'll, you know, let Kevin tell you about what's going on with him. I'm going to be in Sharknado 5 August 6th. All right, you've got a long career, you've done just about every kind of thing, not Sharknado. So hey ho, I'm in Sharknado 5 briefly. And this other movie I wanted to just mention, that if you've been to a convention, which obviously you have, I did a film called Brutal Massacre. People know what it is? It's a pretty cool movie, I recommend it. It's on, you know, it's on, because it's in a DVD. This was a movie that I played the director of a really bad horror film called Brutal Massacre. And the director, Stephen Mena, wrote it because he had recently done a film that was, you know, his first debut film. And all these things happened to him in the course of shooting an independent film, which he put into our film, Brutal Massacre. So it's pretty funny. It takes place, it opens at Fangoria Convention. I'm supposedly this famous director of horror films. And my films suck, but everybody thinks I'm a brilliant director. So it's part of the comedy. I recommend, if you get a chance to get a copy of Brutal Massacre. And then this last year, on Facebook, The Hatred is this new horror film that's coming out. That it's so funny. The director had me in it for a minute and a half, you know, playing basically the adult who's leaving the house for the weekend, and these four girls spend the weekend in this house, and this film is called The Hatred. The trailer is freaky. I go to you know, The Hatred on Facebook and look at the trailer. It is pretty spooky. And they said to me, "Hey, we've entered it at the Madrid Film Festival, and you were nominated for Best Supporting Actor." And I said, "Wow, are you going to send me to Madrid?" They didn't call me back. And the other thing was, clearly the nominating committee didn't see this movie, because I'm in it about like that long, you know. But it's nice to be nominated for something in Madrid. And anyway, check out The Hatred. And now here's Kevin.
So Underworld started out really, you know, in a conversation between Lynn Wiseman, the director, and I. And, you know, I have to give him, you know, the credit, because he's the one who came to me after having a meeting at Dimension Films. And Dimension wanted to do a werewolf movie, because Blade at the time had done so well for the vampire genre. So Lynn called me and he says, you know, we had written something together before. And he says, well, look, you know, this is what they told me, and I'm not getting any good screenplays coming from, you know, his agency at the time. So he asked me if I had anything or any ideas, you know, as far as a werewolf movie idea. And I said, you know, not really. And, you know, the reason being is because even though I love werewolves as a concept, there had only been, you know, 2 werewolf movies, you know, maybe 3 to really speak of. You know what those are? You know, the first one was The Wolfman. That's the first time we saw it on screen. And then the other 2 were The Howling and American Werewolf in London.
Yep.
You know, and the thing I liked about, you know, the latter 2 was the fact that it was the first time they had depicted, in terms of morphology, a snout-nosed bipedal werewolf. You know, and I said, wait a minute, that's something different, and of course, why not? So I told Lynn, as long as we do that kind of creature, I'm in. So I thought about it for about a week. I came up with an idea that he seemed to like, and he said he wanted to meet to talk about it. So at the end of our session for that day, I drove to his house, and I said, look, I got another idea, and, don't say anything until I finish, And I said, because we can't go in there with just one idea, because, I've been in situations before with friends where they have this amazing opportunity to pitch to a larger company. And if you only have one idea and they don't like it, well, that's a short conversation. So he was like, well, I don't have anything. I'm like, well, listen. I said, what if we did a Romeo and Juliet, type of story with werewolves? But instead of Montagues and Capulets, we have werewolves on one side, but vampires on the other. And we make it like a surrealistic interracial love story against the backdrop of a centuries-old race war, And he just looked blankly at his feet and folded his arm and was like, I don't know, dude, is this gonna work? Well, here we are, 5, 6 movies deep, and, so it worked like a charm. But it took a while to sell even after I wrote the original screenplay. We brought in another writer, and studios just did not get it because their thing is that vampires, and werewolves prior to had only been really portrayed as these single entities, you know what I'm saying? Never as races. Now, Dracula might have, been some females, and they turned into his vamps or whatever, but, that was about it. So they were really skittish about it. Hollywood is extremely risk adverse. So they were like, this is crazy, but once it went out there and everyone saw what it was, they were like, you know what? No. And finally, Lakeshore picked it up, but not before they had passed on it twice already. And once again, they just didn't get it either, and no one thought it would work. So suffice it to say, it came in to Lakeshore through a backdoor channel. And it got the yes all the way up this backdoor channel until it got to the president who, rejected it twice. And he was like, well, I already rejected this. And they were like, well, why? And they made the decision to go ahead and take the chance. And like I said, here we are. So that's how it happened. But I have been a lifelong monster fan, ever since I was a kid. And I think the impetus for my whole, interest into genre, whatever, was probably dinosaurs. Because they were real monsters, you know what I'm saying? And after that, believe it or not, it sounds silly, but it was Scooby-Doo. Yeah. Totally. And back in the, the late 60s, when I was, wee type, Scooby-Doo was scary, but it was cool, And so, it started this lifelong fascination with, with horror films for me, and trying to do mashups or things that, we had never seen before. Like after I saw The House of Frankenstein and The House of Dracula, where you have, more than just one monster, fighting, 3 of them, I was like, there's something here that we can utilize, And so, with Underworld, it was vampires versus werewolves. Frankenstein that I created was supposed to be something altogether different, and they jacked it up, So if you look on my IMDb page, I have another monster film that I'm going to be shooting next year called The Jekyll and Hyde Detective Agency, and that will be what I've always wanted to do. It will have several monsters, and it will be cool, believe me. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I like that.
Have any questions for either one of us? There's a hand right there. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
We're both from Minnesota.
Oh, good.
And so,
Still like.
I know. I was just extremely proud of you when Underworld came out, and I know I've heard of your background. Can you talk about, I know that you have a microbiology
Yeah, degree, yes.
degree and also in genetic engineering.
Yeah, that was in grad school, but I didn't finish that one.
But
Yeah.
I'm curious though, in terms of the biology and the morphology of your idea with lycanthropes and vampires. Can you talk a little bit about, like, did you, because you obviously had a love of dinosaurs growing up
Yeah.
and the whole zoology and all of that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about any influence or ideas for concepts that you may have thought about or wanted to interpret in the whole Underworld universe?
Yeah, what I was trying to do, you know, based upon hybrids, recombinant DNA, things like that, was to find a scientific way as to why these creatures existed. Now, all of it's hogwash, you know, because we're talking about comic book science here. But I used my scientific background as an impetus and a template on which to build something that was plausible, you know, in this world. Like, there are things that, you know, mankind has yet to discover, you know, things like that. And some of it is going to sound silly to you guys, you know, but there are like natural monsters called territoids, you know, which are based on, you know, some kinds of genetic mutations, you know, that occur in nature because of accidents, you know. Some are initiated by pesticides or radiation, things like that. Some are hybrids, and a lot of things that we just have not seen before. Like if you look at your deep sea fish, you know, I mean, that are at the bottom of the deepest parts of the ocean. There are some wicked things down there. And there is a theory that there are some prehistoric, you know, creatures that may still be around. Like when I was taking paleontology in school, there is this theory that the Loch Ness Monster is a population of plesiosaurs, you know, that live in the loch, and there's probably more other places. You know, they say that Sasquatch is most likely a North American ape, you know, that hasn't been discovered yet, you know, or not the way we think. The same thing with the Yeti, you know, and I've talked to different scientists, and they have different views. They're like, you know, most are skeptical, you know, because it's like, well, how can something that big still exist, you know, without anyone having taken a credible photograph of it or something of that nature. But, you know, with my scientific background, it's fascinating to explore, you know, and, you know, see what else is out there. So once you meld real science with, you know, speculative science and speculative fiction, you can come up with a myriad of different, you know, creatures, you know, like gorgons. You know, I had a scientific explanation for gargoyles, dragonites, pantherics, things like that. You know, and so all of this helped, you know, really initiate, you know, where I was going with Underworld.
That's great.
Yep.
Any other questions?
So,
More of a comment, and this is directed David's way. First of all, for anyone that hasn't seen the remastered version of American Werewolf in London that came out last year, incredible. The sharpest picture and sound I've ever seen. Looks awesome. And I forgot just how the final scene in Piccadilly Circus was, just how off the chain and crazy it was. And I got to thinking to myself, you know, this scene would make a great scene for Allstate, the Mayhem commercial. Protect yourself from mayhem, Allstate.
Very interesting. You know, I should also mention John Landis' son, Max Landis, who many of you maybe have seen or know about, is writing the remake of American Werewolf in London, which supposedly written and directed by Max Landis, executive produced by John Landis. A family affair.
Yay!
And, you know, my people ask me, you know, how did I feel about it? In the same way they say, what did I think about American Werewolf in Paris? Which I can't really talk about. Is there anything to say about that movie? But as far as the remake goes, you know, initially you kind of go, hey, look, can't you just leave well enough alone? You know, we did this movie. It's sort of like, you know, stood the test of time. It's kind of a, you know, one of those benchmarks for practical makeup. Check it out. And then I thought, wait a minute, what about the next generation of young film goers and horror fans who will see maybe this if it's ever made and released And what will be the conversation? Yeah, it was good, but did you see the original? At which case, hey, I'm back in. The next generation will finally discover us. And so, it'll just perpetuate what was a pretty cool experience. I have to say there was, one of the things about the film that seems to hold up in not just as a showcase for practical makeup, but also as, using London as a backdrop makes it pretty current. Because if any of you have been to London recently or plan to go in the next 500 years, it's going to stay the same.
Yeah.
So it's the same set. And that's the only thing that's changed is we got a little older 35 years later, which is what happens. I don't know if some of you know who Paul Davis is. He did the thing on the back, the Beware the Moon documentary, basically, of the making of the film. Then he came out with a hardcover book called Beware the Moon. It's a pictorial and lots of information. In fact, I had to read up on it just to brush up on his knowledge of the movie that I was in, And he's sort of got this whole little career going for himself. He just finished doing a book for The Lost Boys. And sort of other films that are out there going, what a good idea, keep it current, come up with a book, a pictorial book, or facts and stories. And so that's, another thing, if you get a chance to look at the Beware the Moon book. And I thought what I was going to do at some point, because over the course of the years that I've been doing these conventions, I tend to meet all kinds of interesting people. Many of you are sitting right in front of me right now. But some are artists, and so I meet a ton of artists who make stuff or were inspired by the film and will paint or sculpt or draw some kind of werewolf thing, and they always make a copy or give me the original or an original if they made a couple. And so I've had a chance to collect these sort of collectible werewolf things, which I feel I should share at some point. Not just say for my kids who will go, yeah, this was my dad's stuff. But actually maybe publish it at some point with their permission, saying, look at some of the cool things I got from fans over the years.
For both of you, what were your favorite scenes, possibly, that you filmed for each of the series or individual films?
Well, just from my standpoint, there were always challenges, particularly, it was all, the way we shot the movie, then we wrapped everything, all principal photography, and then just did the transformation at the end. It was just Rick Baker and his crew and me for, a week of getting in makeup and doing that transformation. But during the course, so it was always in the back of my mind, during the course of the shooting of it, there were always challenges in terms of where the character was, in terms of his own reality of the realization that he was going to be a werewolf. Talk about being in denial. That was kind of like what I was doing the entire film. I would have to say that the wolf scene was probably one of the most challenging for me. There was no wardrobe on that particular scene. B, I'm in a cage with 3 real wolves. That was, and there's no real, these aren't, you can't tame a wolf. These were real wolves. They were privately owned. It wasn't like they were at a zoo. So they'd been handled, which was encouraging. The other encouraging thing was I go, well, what about them? They go, well, they've been fed. That was the thing that I took with me as I got into the cage. They've been fed. And the other thing was they asked was, no loud noises, no fast movement. I go, give them the script, please. Show them that when I wake up and see where I am, I get the hell out of there as quickly as I can. But as quietly as I can. And it was a good, and I was explaining to John and the camera, our DP, great guy, Bob Painter, to tell them this is a one take, come on now, I want to do this once. Because I had to wake up, see them, look for a way to get out, and scale this high set, which almost came apart. If you happen to check it out again, I'll just remind you, as I'm going up the wall, the fencing starts to come off the side of it, and I go, oh no, I'm going to crash right into the
wolves.
Right into the wolves, and that will be considered a loud noise.
Fast movement.
That was probably one of the coolest, and a one take, and we did it. The other cool thing was too, of course, we did a huge accident, a crash in Piccadilly Circus. So we couldn't get permission. We couldn't get permission for it. Trying to get work permits just for us in the beginning was ridiculous. We're saying we're creating all these jobs for the crew and everyone that's going to be associated with this film. It's being shot here. We still couldn't get 4 work permits to work there, but we finally did. But we couldn't get permission to create close Piccadilly Circus and have this big car crash, you know, when we realized that I'm running across the street and everything, all hell breaks loose. So of course what they did was, as John would say, is we're gonna do it anyway. So at like 5 o'clock in the morning at dawn, we had stuntmen on every corner. It's like 5 streets come into Piccadilly Circus, you know, and merge into a gigantic roundabout is basically what it is. And with cameras on all the buildings. And on go, I just couldn't believe, these cars just come flying in, crash, you hear cut on the radio, and then they just whoosh, fast, just disappear into the night as they just take off. And 5 seconds later you go, was there just a car accident right there? And that was probably one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen. So everything you see in the movie, we actually shot. You know, the transformation was right before your eyes. No real fancy, no trick photography, no CGI. You know, nothing, just pre-digital age. And everything that we tried to accomplish, we actually had to shoot. So that was probably, you know, one of those memorable moments.
For me, it was probably the opening scene on Underworld, because I'm a big, you know, gun freak, and it's like being able to shoot these Steyr TMP, you know, double gun after I yelled blood, and you know the way I pulled them out, you know, to me it was just really fun, and that's what I remember and enjoy the most, you know. When I guess another scene too was when you know, you're working with, you know, foreign stuntmen. And unfortunately, these cats aren't paid a lot of money. And I remember there was this 5'8" dude, and when I was running into the train, and I bowled him over, and I'm like, man, you know, how hard do you want me to go? And, you know, I remember the first take, I didn't hit him very hard. It was like, all right, cut. You know, the man's like, cut. Yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna go, you know, barreling into this guy. And then I'm also hearing from the gun master, who was British SAS. And this cat, you know, he was the gun guy and they were his guns. So Lynn would tell me, okay, now, when you finish, when your clip's empty, throw the gun away and then barrel in. And when he would tell me to do something, the SAS guy said, please don't. You know, he's like, don't please. You know, and it's like, well, you know, what am I gonna do? So anyway, we shoot again. I barrel into the guy. He goes flopping over, and then I don't, you know, you can probably see it now that I've told you, but I take the gun and I gently, you know, I throw it on the cushion seat, you know, and I'm like, I hope that's okay. But you know, there are all these things you have to be mindful of when you're shooting, and that was one of the more memorable things that I remember. I think you had a question too.
One more, yeah.
Yeah, this is for David. I'm so glad you brought up Brutal Massacre. I'm a big fan of that movie and a huge cheerleader for it. How did you get involved with it, and what was it like working on that movie?
Brutal Massacre, for those of you that haven't seen it, it's a spoof on, you know, horror films. And it's the things that are put in this movie actually happened to this director, a young filmmaker, on another film. These are some examples. We're on a set, we need a prop, he turns to a production assistant, gives him money and the keys to the van, says, hey, listen, go into town and I'm gonna need this right away. Guy jumps in the van, takes off, they go, who was that guy? He doesn't work for us. Just a guy watching on the screen, you know, on the set. They went, oh, he just took off in our van with $100. But that actually happened to him in another, you know, so that's a scene in the show. There's another one where, you know, the late Gunnar